created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Nome di lui siamo scomparigi nel cuore innamorato.
And we are opening this program, this dissection program, with one of the most well-known arias for the sopranos. Of course, you have already identified we are talking about Caro, Nome, an aria that is part of one of the three most well-known operas by Maestro Verdi. Of course, we are referring to Rigoletto in the voice of Gilda, a soprano, that we are about to talk about some characteristics of the voice of the soprano. And of course, you have just heard Katia with the opening words of the role that many think is very lovely. We will bring that conversation with her, provided that she can sing this role. I think she's in a very good position to share with us her thoughts on the role of Gilda. So Katia is with us. You may notice that when Katia sings, there seems to be a problem with the microphone that is called saturation. And the microphones saturate when there is way too much sound coming through them. So the anecdote that the sopranos can break glasses hardly ever happens, but sopranos can saturate microphones. So that's what you just heard. In general, opera singers can saturate a microphone, but in particular sopranos, given the amount of harmonics that they can produce. So that's what you have witnessed. And so, Katia, with that being said, let's talk a little about Gilda. We know Gilda is young. We say she's portrayed as innocent, and she's opening with these words of love. What is the name of the man she thinks she loves? His name is Waltier Malde. So maybe for a woman who falls in love for the first time, saying the name of the love of her life is something supreme. What do you think about this opening?
Well, I think that when you are a young girl, uh, you have the name of this beloved person on your lips the whole time, and I love the notes that Verdi chose to express this Waltier Malde, because it sounds like she's leaving her breath runs in the air. She's talking about this handsome and interesting guy. She is like amazed by him, and I think that it's a very interesting note, this E, because it's a high note but not too much, so it can sound sweet.
Yeah, and it is good that you mentioned it, because we need also not only to talk about the note, the height of the note itself, but also on the quality or the interpretation of the sound. And you just mentioned Gilda says the name of Waltier with sweetness.
Yeah.
And that is very important, because people need to believe that as you, Gilda, project your voice, if you do horribly the Walter Malde, nobody's going to believe the Caro Nome.
Yeah, that's true. And you, as a soprano, you have to be very careful in this note, because it's, at least for me, the point where I start to sound like a soprano. If I sing lower than this, for example, in the end of the phrase, I have solved the notes, but it's not my hit. I start to sing from this E to high, but I can explode. It's not the idea. You have to control your voice, and sometimes it can be exhausting, and you're just beginning the area. So
Yeah, and it is very important. Yeah, it is very important that you refrain from doing it. We have mentioned in other episodes, in other programs, in the many seasons, that even if you have the voice, there are roles that demand you to be in control. And that's what the opening of Caro Nome demands from the soprano. Yes, 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 the high notes and all the ornaments come later, but at this point in time, you have to convince people that you are deeply in love for the man you call Waltier Maldé. And so, Caro Nome, the beloved name, the Caro Nome really means Waltier Maldé.
yeah,
So knowing that you're talking about Walter Maldé, which is a fake name by Il Duca di Mantova, that miserable guy, but you don't know it. You are Gilda and you don't know it yet. And so I wanted to also use your comment that you mentioned that you start with a comfortable E, but you have to descend at the end of the phrase. But Maestro Verdi, and we are going to see it throughout the whole aria, Maestro Verdi was an expert in making the life of singers miserable in more than one way.
he's gonna make you cry.
Yeah, because we noticed we're going to talk about it. He has shakaturas, he has trills, and he adds it in your high register, but he also put them in the lower register. So, I mean, Maestro Verdi, when are you going to stop? Wasn't it difficult enough already?
Kill me, please.
Yeah, so let's get started now that we have mentioned the state of mind of Gilda, and then we start with the same phrase. But we are going to run into something very interesting that I would appreciate your thoughts on this. Because when she says, Caro, no, pay attention. Of course, I am not a soprano, and I cannot do it. But there is this small pause when she says, Caro, no, me, quel, mio, cor. And this has to be done beautifully. And I know Katia will give us an example of this. Provided the example and my voice, it sounds exaggerated, but it has an intention. It's like Gilda is hesitating, right?
Yes,
In this
she's losing her breath.
And as she loses her breath, she passes us this message, and that's what these pauses mean. But these pauses have to be very carefully executed because otherwise they will sound weird, you know. Caro no me que mio. That is not caro no me que mio. That is not the idea. Even if Maestro Verdi did not write all of those in a sense of legato, still the musician in Gilda, the musician in the soprano understands that the color and the tension has to remain the same. Could you like to give us an example of these passages at the beginning where we have these pauses?
Sure. In this case, I would mention that you stop the voice, but you don't cut the air. That's the way I think it. And so on.
Yeah, and also, and it happens with these arias that are so, how to call them? it's easy. We have mentioned it when we talked about the bel canto. It's very easy to get away with your vocal defects in the verismo, because verismo is mostly yelling, no, high volume and powerful orchestration. So if you have a problem with an area of your voice, nobody will notice, because most likely the orchestra will never let people notice that ear, or you can always increase volume so that people never notice that your E or your D is not well developed. You can always work around it. But also remember that at the beginning, there is basically no orchestra. There is just a few chords accompanying the voice of the soprano. So if the soprano fails at these delicate short notes, everybody will notice. That's highly, you're highly exposed when singing the Caro Nome. If you were singing Il Bella Figlia dell'Amore and the quintet that comes later, it's much easier, right? Because everybody's singing and everybody's doing his stuff. But now you only have a very delicate, light, soft orchestration and everybody listening to your voice, which of course is lots of pressure.
Yes, and let's mention also that it's exactly one of the most known arias in the world. So everybody is expecting Il Caro Nome. Everybody knows Il Caro Nome. Everybody knows how does it sound or how it should.
And adding to the difficulties after this process, which need to be made with intention, we have, and we mentioned that Maestro Verdi did, how can I make the soprano's life difficult? And so he says, Festi primo palpitar, and right after the palpitar, you need to ascend to le delicie dell'amor. When you say amor, then you need to ascend from amor, which is a low note, to mi del sempre ramentar. That link of the phrases wrapping up with a low note, immediately ascending for a higher note, is repeatedly happening in the aria, and that demands homogeneity, which of course it's not easy to achieve. Do you have an advice, or how do you like to think about this small challenge that Maestro Verdi wrote for the soprano?
Uh, Something that has helped me in these cases is that you have two ways of read your score: high, low notes, or left to the right. If I read high and low notes, it could sound like este primo palpi, and my voice will get heavier as I descend. But if I think this from the left to the right, este primo palpi, my high note is pretty close to the low one, so I don't feel that jump.
And it is also very important now, again, that you mentioned, because when you are singing, you are always planning ahead.
Yes.
You, and you have to do it positively. We have mentioned in other programs and seasons the cases of tenors or singers in general who torment themselves around a note that they know they are not comfortable with. And all the aria is around that note. And it doesn't have to be a high note, it could be a low note, right? Maybe if you are a mezzo, and even if you're a mezzo, but you accepted to sing Ulrica, and when you have to go for Re de la bis and say Re, how am I going to sing Re when I can't do it comfortable? But when you plan all your resources, and Katia has already mentioned it, you have to think also in terms of the air, how much air you have. Because notice, if you take a breath in palpi tar. If you take the breath in palpitar, you absolutely make a pause that everybody will notice. Even if you take your breath rapidly, palpitar, la, immediately people will notice, and people are expecting the voice to flow from palpitar to le delizie del amor. So you have to plan your breathing somewhere else. So it's not only that you have to present a low note right after, followed by a higher note. It is that it has to have the same color, sound nicely homogeneous, and that you have to breathe somewhere else. Where, I don't know, I am not a soprano, but Katia can tell us where would she breathe instead, because she has to breathe, right?
Yes, well, there are some scores that have some breathing suggestions, but exactly, it is like when you go as a soprano to get a dress, and there are many dresses, but you have to check one by one which one is the dress that fits you the best. So in this case, to study an aria as difficult as this one, it means not just to check, okay, for example, Caro, Nome, che mio cor, E, D, C, B, A, etc. It's not just to read the notes. You have to make a plan. Where do I breathe? How much air do I need? For example, here in my score, it suggested that I can breathe just between P and tar. Festi primo palpi, breathing, tar, breathing, le delizie. It's not something that fits to me. I prefer to finish the phrase Festi primo and it's until that point that I take my eighth breathing, and so on.
And I think this also brings us to the conversation that you, as a singer, need to know your resource. Of course, your resource or your instrument is your voice. You know that if you have not been very diligent in your breathing technique, then you will hardly get away with many things because you will be needing to breathe often. And needing to breathe often also makes your voice be tired. And you are also more tense because you are chasing the place where you will be able to breathe when you are expected to have this planned and controlled. And I know that many of you have witnessed singers who are in the middle of something and run out of breath and then catch the breath and continue. That could be because of nervous, that could be because he didn't know the area very well, which could be the case, could also be the case that he has not trained his diaphragm correctly. And from my perspective, the worst excuse is to use a poor diaphragm development, because that's one of the fundamentals of a singer. But before we get trapped in that, I just wanted to mention that so far Gilda has said, Caro nome che il mio cor festi primo palpitar, le delizie dell'amor mi dei sempre ramentar. So she has told us how she wants to keep that beloved name in her heart, and that she never wants to forget that name, still always with that sound of an innocent girl. I don't recall if we have a hint anywhere on the age of Gilda, but I assume she must be in his, I don't know, 15, 18s, right?
Yeah, she's well. If you know the entire work of Rigoletto, you have present that she has lived hidden from the rest of the world because Rigoletto exactly is afraid that the curse falls on her, and he's a bad guy. Rigoletto is a terrible person, so he has to protect the most beloved person, Gilda. Uh, so she's not just very young. I think that yes, she must be around 15, 16 years old, but she also lives within a bubble. She doesn't know the world. So when she has a chance to meet someone and who is a very experimented person and a mean guy, well, she was the perfect victim.
Yeah, and it is true that she doesn't really know the world, and even Giovanna, who is supposed to be taking care of her, in fact, she's an ally of Il Duca di Mantova. So at the end, in the whole opera, the only good person is Gilda. Everybody is evil. I should mention people like Rigoletto. They empathize with the loss of Gilda, but to be sincere, Rigoletto deserved it. I mean, he's been part of the abductions and of all the horrible things that Il Duca does. So with this pureness, this pure of character is that she sings, I want to remember his name forever. Col pensieri il mio desir a te sempre volerò. And here we reach one of the very interesting parts, because remember that sopranos like Katia like ornaments, and so why not, let's go for a trill. E te sempre volerà. And these trills are tricky because, again, still in the mood of the purity of the sound, you have to make a nice trill. I could say, and unless you want to correct me, Katia, if you don't have trills, never sing Caro Nome.
No, please, no.
Because Caro Nome without a beautiful trill is something else. Maybe go and sing Traviata or something else, but don't go for
You can
Caro.
always be Norma or something.
You can always be someone else, but certainly not Gilda. Because Gilda has this part, a te sempre volerò. She has two thrills, and then goes for volerà e fin l'ulti. And now she's descending, and again she's adding two thrills. So very easy for the spectator. I mean, I am singing and I am watching at Katya singing, but in her mind, she knows that she's facing a challenging passage. How do you suggest? How do you aboard this passage of the aria?
I know that you will believe me because you know my voice. Oof, since we were babies. uh,
Yeah, a
but
few years ago,
the
very recently. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The most difficult point here for me, it was the F, the low one. Because I come from singing like a bird. I was a nightingale, and suddenly I have to land on this F. It's like, oh my god. It was a challenge because I always have problems with low notes because of my high and light voice. Uh, so it at the beginning it was like uh, it was difficult, but when I developed much better my low notes, and I have always in my mind from left to the right, it gets much easier. I got high enough, a high enough position of my voice in this part of my register. So it felt like I mentioned to my students, you have to feel your voice like one single piece. It's an everything. It's it's just like when you finish a puzzle and you don't see anymore the small pieces. You see a whole thing. So that's the goal of working your voice. So now that I have decent low notes, it sounds like col pensier il mio desiderate sempre
And again, as Maestro Verdi thought, it wasn't difficult enough. She's going to keep repeating that phrase, col pensiero il mio desiderate sempre volerà, e fin l'ultimo mio sospir, caro nome tuo sarà. Col pensiero il mio desir. There are all these variations that Maestro Verdi. So he basically was very creative. All the ornaments that he created around the same phrases. But of course, given the amount of time that we have for an episode, we don't have time to go each of the ornaments. But for this second part, where all the ornaments are coming one right after another, how would you like to look into it? Because the first part is somehow calm, right? You come from the
Yeah.
Rigoletto, Caro, Nome, ta ta ta. But now you will only start. You will start making all types of ornaments. Go for high notes, and even if you like, then go for a cadenza. Why don't you walk us a little through this final part where the sopranos have all the fun in the world?
Okay. Could you tell me exactly what do you want to hear? I can sing everything.
I don't know. Why don't we go to? We have the first, the following repetition. Col pensiero il mio desir, tararararara, me tuo sarà. But then again, go back for col pensiero il mio desir. Why don't we take it from there? Because you will have ate sempre volerà, and then you will have a descending scale.
Sure.
Then go back, not high, but go to the center. But I remember that the first time I heard that scale, they said, "What's going on in the mind of Giuseppe Verdi?"
I
Why
think
doing
that he
that?
had too many free time. Okay, so can we take from the second compensier?
Yep.
Okay. Compensier il mio desir, a te sempre volerò.
there are way so many things that we could talk about this of this second part of the aria. Uh, Maybe going to because she's basically not speaking when she says ate bolera and starts with those. I would like to say it is in this part, these floated notes. This part, it's uh, like she's happy, like she's daydreaming, like she's being carried away by the dreams of hers with El Duca. And for me, unless you tell me differently, for me, what Maestro Verdi transmitted with all these notes is basically that the emotion of the girl who has put into words earlier, but now there is no need for the words. It's just notes that tell us about the emotion. And by the way, talking from the technical part of it, I really appreciate when the soprano is on the right pitch because there is this tendency to sing these notes flat or lower, transpose it lower, because it is not, again, that it is easy. I mean, I understand this is a very difficult part to sing, but we go back to that. As we said, if you don't have trills, don't even try Caro Nome. If if for your voice as a soprano, singing higher than a G or an A makes your voice sound too thin, don't hope for el caro nome. Because you're expected to feel comfortably flowing in that part. But if you look at the soprano and you notice that she's having a horrible time singing the final part of Caro Nome, nobody's going to enjoy it. The soprano is not enjoying what she's doing, and the audience is not going to enjoy what she's doing. So when you have the opportunity of listening to a version, to a soprano who is working on this passage, and you see that she's doing comfortable, then so when you have the chance to enjoy it as well, because you go to the opera to enjoy, not to suffer, to think, oh my God, this time he's going to break the note. Oh my God, she's not going to be able to do it.
This is not going to happen.
And I wanted to ask you, to start wrapping up today's episode, on the final part, we know that you changed, at least from the score that I have here, your cadenza. It's a little different from what I have here. But what comes to your mind when you have to prepare your final cadenza? You do what is written, you prefer to do some adjustments, it really depends on the composer, or what comes to your mind? You say, why going for a C where I can have an E? What are your thoughts when preparing that final part?
I think that I have to think that I'm Gilda in that moment. I already solved all the solfeggio and technique. At this point, I have to express something. So she's in ecstasy. Okay, so she's saying that we'll love this name until her death, and that's terrible because that's something that really happens. Spoiler alert. Okay, so in these cases, when you're in a cadenza, there are written notes and written rhythms, but as a soprano, mainly, you can take it just as a suggestion. And you can play with the time, and you can long some notes and run some others to make it to your the hacerla de tu talla, to make it fit to you. So in this case, you can move your breath, move your air, the way you feel comfortable. So. You're in a delirium, so you don't have to rush.
Yeah, that is important that you mention.
You're floating on the clouds.
Yeah, this has to be some more like floating. Yeah, like in an airy mood rather than in a rush. I mean, it is not Rossini.
Exactly. And if you don't have the air enough to float, sing something else.
Yeah. And now I also wanted to ask you because sopranos like the final word. Sometimes they go for a high note and a very brief ra, sa, ra. They go for the sa and then ra, very brief. When actually the ra is written as a much longer duration, but it may come to a taste. And also, there is very bad habit of many singers, not only male but also female singers, that after having given their final note, high note, they forget about whatever is left. Like they just throw away. Okay, I gave my high note, the rest doesn't mind. And I think that in order to wrap it up beautifully, you have to give a correct value and a correct interpretation to the last ra. Sa,
Yeah.
you are dreaming in the sa, and you did but you have the ra, the last syllable of the word. You don't just throw away the ra. You have to wrap it up nicely. You are wrapping up, you sharing the dream with the audience. What do you think?
Well, I was thinking so many things while I was listening to you, and I expect to don't say something inappropriate, but after this ecstasy, after this orgasm, you have to rest. I mean, after an orgasm, you don't dress up and leave. Not immediately. You take a breath. You take a rest. So it's as important as the high note is, not just the highest note.
Yeah, it certainly is, but you have to agree that we are in the past 2 decades. Most singers just like to go get away with a high note and forget about anything else, and that is not nice because we are developing in the audience a poor taste. So they are used to listening to a singer who has a high note and gets away with it, and scores like this really need. I mean, all the scores, but when we know that Maestro Verdi was very careful in how to portray his characters, he really invested lots of time in thinking what each of them would project. He wouldn't leave the ra, the last syllable ra, there just because. He did it for a purpose. So it is for the singer to think. It is as Katia shared in her mind. It looks like after the ecstasis, after that peak of emotion, yeah, you go back in control and rest. That may work for you when you're preparing it, but if that doesn't fit you, just think of something. But at the end, try to make justice to the score. Don't throw away the score just because you said, I got a beautiful ornaments. I will just get the applause. Yeah, you made beautiful ornaments, but wrap it up correctly.
Yeah, that last note exists for a reason, and you have to respect it.
So, a final thought on Il Caro Nome. What do you say? Is it a must in your repertoire? Is it an aria that you would like to take for the remaining of your career? How do you see your relationship with the Caro Nome?
I think it's that one of my favorite songs. It's something that I really love to sing. Like I said in another program, I sing it in the first place for myself. So it has a very emotional strength for me. It's something beloved. Is that yeah? I really love to sing El Caro Nome. So I think that is something that when I'm on stage, I can communicate to the people.
And with that being said, I would like to thank people for listening. We are recording this program end of April 2024. Stats keep growing. Thank you very much. Over 78 countries and over 500 cities listening to the program. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. And we will see you in another dissection episode. Thank you.
You can follow our channel for the latest updates and more content. Opera We Love Singing, in just one word. Link in the description of the episode.